Kenya. We have here the Professor Neki Frashri. Professor Frashri is the head of the Department for Natural Science and Technique, so in the academy, and he can say some words for the coming here in this building. Yeah, thank you, Professor.
Dear Professor Allier, Professor Goller, Professor Doka, Professor Chiazzi, welcome in the hall, Alex Buddha of Academy of Sciences. Alex Buddha was the first president of Academy of Sciences in Albania, which is established in 1971. As Academy, we had also a difficult period of transition from 90s. And now we may say that we have some equilibrium in this. And in the framework of our activities, we have several permanent commissions that are composed mostly from professors from different universities. One of those commissions covers problems of geography. There's another commission for engineering and so on. And also we have some temporary virtual research units which deal with specific projects, and this conference is part of the activities of the Research Center for Geographical Studies. For us, it's a great pleasure to host you in this hall. The topic of your conference, it is very interesting. Interesting also for me that I am from mathematics and computing. So I am not an expert in urban issues. It is interesting because it deals with two issues. One is the transition, and the world is all time in a transition. Things change. Remember that 30 years ago, it was the period when the internet was opened for the public. You know, one of the biggest conferences in the time, one engineer said something about cities in the US for many years ago, how the cities has shifted from one place to another during several decades because of changes in the transport. First, cities was built in the road when caravans used to go from east to west. Then it came the river, and the first cities was abandoned, and new cities were created during the river. And next it was the railway. But now we are living in a period of very fast changes. And here we have to deal with the second topic, that is the fact that urban centers are the basis where the human activities, human society is evolving. And human society is the most complex system that exists. It is not a universe when everywhere we apply the same laws. Human society is like a multiverse, where each universe has its own laws. And also, we know from the theory of complex systems that when actions are faster than reaction, system goes chaotic. So from this point of view, in my perspective, this conference is very interesting. And I wish you a successful conference, and hope that this line of such conferences will continue in the future, and probably you may come again in this hall. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Neki Prashri. And now the floor for Professor Vesnik Aliye. Professor Aliye is the rector of the private university, Polis University here in Tirana, a very good university. And Professor Aliye has a very hard work about urban development of Tirana. Please.
Welcome to all friends of the Cities After Transition Network and Conference. And of course, thank you to the Academy of Science for hosting us in this historic building. Thank you to the Bamberg University that is somehow driving force now for this event today. And of course, the local partners, the unit that was mentioned here in Academy of Geography, University of Tirana faculty that deals also with geography, and Polis University, where we have a faculty about urban planning, environmental studies, and management. I will try to just speak by my heart shortly to bring some feelings, because I've been testimony of this radical change that happened in our country and this city. Half of my life was in a centralized economy, and half of my life is in this so-called in transition, after transition period. So I'm almost on the top of the hill, as I say, usually with my colleague Sodir Damo, that will present also tomorrow, one of our cases. We are in the top of the hill, and we are able now to see in both sides what was good, what was bad, and what could be corrected, what should be, let's say, taken in consideration. In few words, I can see some periods in this transition, and I can try to identify a few phenomena that happened. By the way, I see here some faces which are very familiar for us and worked for us, worked with us also during the periods that we had established our institute, the origin of university, Coplan Institute, 30 years ago, and now 20 years ahead. There was this establishment of the university, which I can mention a little bit during my speech. In the first decade after the change, I have to mention you that the change here was dramatic. More dramatic in any other country that was in so-called Eastern Europe. Each country faced their own problems, but in Albania, because of the way the centralized economy was implemented, the dogma that was implemented here for 5 decades, almost 5 decades, brought also a reaction which is normal, very radical. So the changes happened in a short time. If you ask me where the transition ends in Albania, in fact ends in 97, with the collapse of pyramidal investment schemes, financial schemes, where it was a moment that everybody felt in their skin the consequences of not knowing what is the market economy, what is pluralism. Because in the moment of liberation for the so-called national prison, everybody is happy, celebrating, but one day it comes down to reality, to earth, and you discover that you don't have enough experience and knowledge to deal with the new reality. For some other people, transition continued longer, and of course, culturally speaking, including from geographic and demographic specifically point of view, transition, of course, maybe continues yet in this moment. But I would say that this was the moment that we as society tried to reflect and change in terms of how to behave in this new situation. In the first decade, 1 in 4 Albanians left immediately the country, emigrated. At all types of means they could do it, formally or informally, they left the country. So we ended up at the end of period of so-called communism, a little bit less than 4 million, if I can say this figure, 3.5. But yeah, more or less this kind of figure. 1 million left. And you have seen maybe some pictures or movies of this dramatic emigration of this population that try to see for better life in neighboring country and then slowly distribute it all over Europe. Later, they will become very important for the transition. From those that stayed here, the second decade was a little bit more optimistic because also the conflict in Kosovo and in the war in Yugoslavia ended. Yugoslavia was dismissed and then was more peaceful region somehow. But we experienced in 1999, and I've been also testimony of this moment, like many other Albanians. In 1 week, we got in the country 1 million refugees because of war, displaced from Kosovo to Albania. And you can imagine what does it mean for a society which is not able to stay on its own feet for itself and not to accommodate also a new 1/3 of population that is coming suddenly in the country. And that is also a very specific moment that has to be considered. But the second decade was somehow a little bit more happy. There was the process of decentralization introduced, which I think was a good decision. And there was this period of somehow liberalism, but in the same time, there was this spirit for developing the businesses, for pushing for the economy, trying to be integrated to the regulations of the EU, although the EU was a little bit skeptical for many reasons. But there was some efforts to establish the rule of law, to establish certain, let's say, economy that was improving and increasing the quality of life for people. But the immigration continued in a more sophisticated and more, let's say, hidden way. So we lost the most educated people, especially the young ones, which could not wait for the transformation till the end. So they decided to go in Germany, they decided to go to United States, to Canada, where we have populations like equal to cities, one city, for example, that is dispersed in these countries. But again, they are important. During the first and second decade, this massive emigration of population compared to the total size was important because they brought slowly remittances in the country. The remittances were important. Initially, 50% in early 90s were coming from remittances, later 25% because the economy, local economy started to grow. But they still remain important and significant because they come to spend holidays in Albania, for example, to make the so-called summer touristic period, also to spend it near the families and to explore the beauties of the countries which they know better. Not talking for foreigners that visit, and which is very important now for the economy. Privatization of housing stock happened in early 90s. Almost 97 to 98% not to say 100%, was privatized and given to people as a part of the policies that politics decided to implement to somehow relax the population that after this period of turbulent period of communism. And later on, the new sector of construction industry started to develop. Construction industry has been very important in the country during the second decade. And now in this moment, it's also booming. It's not justified by the internal resources. We have to mention this. But now we are becoming also more global, also in terms of economy, and there are also justification when you talk with politicians and decision makers that how these towers that you see, which is a new phenomena for the cities like Tirana, but not only, how they are developing and who are the people that will be accommodated there, etc. That's a long discussion to be done. From the informal settlements that were the first phase, the new phenomena that happened in early 90s and continued for almost 1.5 decades, we worked as an institute, Coplan Institute, worked with this phenomena for a long time, identified the reason why people come in cities, periphery of Tirana and other bigger cities of the country, urban areas of the country. As a result of this, we also identified that with the collapse of the economy, of the centralized economy, people were looking for a better life, to put it simple. And they cannot wait to stay in a settlement where there is no more healthcare center, there is no more schooling for kids, there is no more mining, working. Everything was operated by authorities, by government before. And they could not wait for the transformation up to the private sector was introduced. So more and more people from periphery started to go to the urban areas. Do not forget that the moment when we changed, 2/3 of population was living often by force in the rural areas. It was one of the most rural society of Europe in 1990. And then suddenly these people will come back to pendulum, moved back, and so they will come to the urban centers. Now we are in a situation where around 60% of population is in urban centers. And to me, if you ask, half of the population in the country is accommodated in the capital region, not only in Tirana, but also if you consider Durrës and Elbasan and Kruja in this metropolitan area. There are almost half of population. It's a model that somehow you see also in countries like Greece, where a big number of population is concentrated in Athens and the rest is in periphery. And the authorities are struggling to maintain people there or to bring back the energy to such human settlements. Because the resources are in periphery, that is the problem. And population is in the center or is emigrating. The third decade is specific in Albania. It's positive and negative in one sense. You know that this global crisis of banking system, real estate in 2006, luckily because of the informality, which was like at the mid of this period of 30 years that I'm discussing now, 3 decades, was like 15% of the economy, the so-called gray economy. This helped us to survive in this shock that hit the global economy. And the effects of the global crisis came to Albania only in 2010 to 2012. That was maybe one of the reasons also why there was also a political change. And the majority that is now came in power in this period. This government now is focused, among others, in the aspects of EU integration. But with opening borders, because of this process, more young people are emigrating. This is a phenomenon which is not happening only in Albania. This is happening also in all Balkan countries, but also it's a problem, global phenomenon, somehow in one way or another. So we are losing the young population. And it is together with Bosnia, and to a certain extent also Serbia, we are the countries that are suffering more in the region now. Greece also is suffering. Also, you maybe read some late articles. Only last year they closed 800, 700, 800 schools in Greece, in periphery, and because there are no people staying there. So the same problem is happening also here. Tourism has been growing radically in this country since the war in Kosovo up to now. We were 300,000 visitors per year, and now we are discussing officially at least for at least 10 million visitors every year, which is not always, to me, healthy. It's good in first look for the economy, but it has also consequences. So to conclude, some phenomena from the informal settlements, we had the process of privatization and informal settlements. We had the process of the gated community that came in the second decade. And then now we are in a phase of densification and verticalization of the city centers and urban centers. So this is from physical point of view. In terms of people, human people, the economy and the standard of life has improved, of course, but we have the issue of poverty. When we discuss about poverty, the poverty in Albania, it's different. It's not the classical poverty that you can find in Africa and Asia. Poverty here has assets, has hidden incomes which are not declared, and more is to be elaborated and discussed about this. But the gap between the so-called those that are doing good and those that are doing bad is increasing every day also. This is another issue that we need to discuss. Before, we lived in the same neighborhoods, in the same buildings, equal to poverty or to the progress. Now there are neighborhoods which are established with so-called new strata that are doing better, and those that are more discriminated. Okay, this is just the first feeling. My colleague will introduce in one of the groups one of our presentation, and I wish you good luck and enjoy Albania. It's the best time to be in spring or in autumn, and so it's a good solution.
Okay, thank you. So I'm the fourth to say welcome to Tirana. So I will skip this and just make an announcement. We want to make a city tour, a guided city tour of approximately 1 hour to give you the chance to grab some more food. Please help us with the food and take another drink. We will start in 15 minutes, something like that. We have to split into groups. This will also take a couple of minutes, but I think we will manage it. We can make a group in German language, which will be guided by Dimitar. He is fluent in German language. And we will make 2 other groups. One is guided by Matthias in the back. Just stand up that people recognize you, Matthias Bickert. And another group will be guided by myself. That's the first point I have to mention. The second one is that I remember when I was the first time in Albania, and then we are talking about last millennium, more or less. I remember that we have been also in the academy, and that we have been welcomed very warmly by, today I will say, Albanian colleagues, not colleagues, friends. And then I'm looking to Perikli Chiriasi, together with your colleague, Archile Balcioli. I was a student in my last days in university and started my PhD studies, but it was not a kind of hierarchy that they looked to me. It was friendship from the very beginning. So we have been on the same level, and they both have been very, very helpful for our studies in Albania. So I want to say Faleminderit to Perikli Chiriasi, the oldest geographer in Albania.